What's up everyone, my name is RoyaleRebelle. In this video I'm going over my initial thoughts on the upcoming horror game Texas Chainsaw Massacre. If you haven't heard, Gun Interactive is coming up with a new game, set to release this August. Based on the Texas Chainsaw movies, this is a 3 vs 4 asymmetrical horror game. And I'm gonna admit some bias to this review, because Gun Interactive was the developer behind Friday the 13th game, and honestly that is the game that got me into horror games. I absolutely loved Friday the 13th, and I was truly devastated when the studio got sued over the IP. So when I heard they were making a new game, I knew I had to get into the technical test, and I'm so glad I did. Fortunately, my husband also got the opportunity to play, so I'll be able to incorporate some of his opinions on the game as well. Because he is a newer player to the asymmetrical horror genre, I think this is a perspective that should also be considered. Disclaimer, these opinions are based on how things performed in the technical test, and things are subject to change. And to note, my most played game currently is Dead by Daylight, so I will be making some references to that game as a comparison. But starting off with the things I liked in the game. Overall, this game has really nice graphics. I would say they're slightly better than what Dead by Daylight currently has, and that was one of the first things my husband also noted. I also appreciate that this game isn't overly dark, which is a pleasant surprise given that this game is predominantly focused on being able to sneak around as the survivors. In this format, you're not really expected to get into one-on-ones with the family, and if you were to do so multiple times in a row, it would ultimately end up with you dying. So it would be really easy for this game to make it super dark, therefore making it easier to hide. But this game accomplishes giving us lots of great hiding spots that don't necessarily require you to go into a physical hiding place, while also keeping high visibility of where you're going, and I think this is just huge in terms of accessibility. That being said, I do like that the survivors have the ability to fight against the family. Again, granted, you're not going to want to do this back to back to back, but this is primarily done with the bone fragments. You can either grapple with the family if they get too close to you when they try to go in for a grab, or they actually have specific traps set around the map that you can interact with as a survivor, so that when the family walks by, it'll stun them. I think this is really good to keep the survivor side from feeling too weak. Next up, I love that this game included multiple ways to communicate. Players have the option to use voice chat as well as text chat in the game, and Friday the 13th was definitely a blueprint for why I continue to push for Dead by Daylight to incorporate voice chat in the game. And I'm so glad it was included in Texas Chainsaw. Honestly, my favorite gaming memories would not have happened if not for in-game chat. Not to mention that there is a high level of cooperation required in this game, so it really is a hindrance not being able to communicate in the game. My hope, however, with this is that the developers will take any reports of users abusing these chat features seriously. I've already seen some creators having a negative experience with the in-game chat features. This really should be viewed as a don't let a few bad eggs spoil the bunch type of scenario, because I stand by that ultimately having voice comms is a greater benefit than detriment to this game. I also really love that there is no solo side in this game. Since asymmetrical horror games have started to rise in popularity, they've almost been exclusively been one versus many, which I personally don't love. I think a huge part of the tension in the Dead by Daylight community can be attributed to the fact that being a solo killer, it's easier to feel alienated or like you're being attacked. And I'm certain there's something that could be said for survivors feeling emboldened because they're not alone, which will only exacerbate any negative feelings after a match. But not only does making this 3 vs 4 a point of difference for Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but it'll probably encourage more players to try that killer side of the game because they're not going to be going in it alone. I will be interested to see how character selection works in the game. During the technical test, players were unable to select who they played as. It was a random pick when you loaded in, which contributed to a large amount of lobby dodging. I imagine for survivors, you'll be able to pick whoever you want because you could do that in Friday the 13th. But for the family, I imagine it'll be a first come first serve type of scenario like it was in the technical test. I really can't imagine that the developers would make it so that there could potentially be 3 bubbles in a match, but I will admit that would be really funny to see. And this is something that's been carried over from Friday the 13th, but I love that there are multiple routes of escape. One of the things that can make Dead by Daylight a little stale is that there's effectively only one route to escape. Finish the gens, open the gates, maybe you're unlucky enough to get the hatch, but the variety of the killers is really the selling point in Dead by Daylight. But having multiple ways of escape really brings the challenge for the family in Texas Chainsaw. I think it was a really interesting choice to make at least some, if not all of the escapes a limited timer, so if you miss the timer you you have to go back and repeat to open again, such as turning off the electricity for the electric fence. Now onto what I didn't love about this game. At this point in time, I can really only think of one thing I didn't like, but I think it's important to note that this is more likely to affect new players to Gun Interactive's games more so than veterans, which I think is going to be a large pool of players coming to this game. I will also admit that most asymmetrical horror games come with this huge learning curve. Unless it's something that's essentially a copy pasta of another game, new players they're gonna struggle to learn. Like, it's just kind of what comes with the territory, and that's just kind of the nature of the genre. I think the tutorials could have been better. A major pain point from my husband's perspective is that even after watching the tutorials, he still was not sure how to play the game. The tutorial basically gave a highlight of the different objectives, but in terms of how to actually play, how things functionally worked, it really wasn't explained well enough. I was surprised to see an infographic on skill trees, but I wasn't able to see in-game how the players' abilities, what were they, how could you utilize them. So jumping into matches, I had no idea what the team's abilities did. When I utilized some of them, I really had no clue what was supposed to be happening, what was I supposed to be looking for, what effect did I gain. This overall is a simple issue that should hopefully be resolved before launch. I know you can look it up, they've already published articles on it, but I think it needs to be incorporated into the game. And then kind of building on that, the objectives themselves were very hard to discover. Granted, this is something that players will learn as they progress through the game, as they become more of a veteran, but in terms of 3 days, which is the only time I had for the technical test, I was only able to find, I think, maybe half an objective, maybe it was one, I'm still not entirely sure. But again, I know learning the spawns of the items that you need to escape, such as the fuse or the water valve, they'll come as you become a more experienced player, but given this technical test was so limited, it was incredibly frustrating not being able to find them during that time. Overall, I am really excited for this game. I think it's bringing something very different in terms of asymmetrical horror games, and I think if the developers play their cards right, this could be a significant rival to Dead by Daylight. I know a lot of people believe that nothing's ever going to rival Dead by Daylight, but this game has potential. I saw more than a few fog whispers in the technical test, which I think is incredibly telling, but I can say for certain that I will be playing this game at launch, and I am so excited for August to come. But those are my thoughts on the game. What do you guys think? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more content, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel so I can bring you more Texas Chainsaw content. And if you want to check out my Twitch streams, don't forget to follow me there so you can be notified of when I go live.